What's up, Buckeye fans? It's Patrick Murphy here from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports for another episode of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. Happy to have you with us after Ohio State's first week of the 2025 season. The Buckeyes, as I'm sure you know, went out and defeated Texas 14-7 to start the year on the most positive note I think you possibly could have done. I think it's the best win that anyone had in week one, despite what some national people will tell you. And I think that it may be the best win of the year, something the Buckeyes will be able to carry with them on their resume throughout the season, assuming Texas continues to be a highly ranked team, which I believe they will. We're going to get into that in this episode of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. We are going to look back at that game and then look ahead to this upcoming week's game with Grambling, and not so much the actual matchup, but sort of where we think the Buckeyes can get better. Before we get going, we're going to crack another cold one here because it is the happy hour after all. Drinking a Bud Light again this week. I've got quite a few Bud Lights in the fridge that we're going to roll through, assuming I don't drink them after covering games. So let's get into it. And to talk about the Buckeyes and this week's game, and specifically the defensive side of the ball, we're bringing in a former Buckeye, a former national champion, Tyvis Powell. Tyvis, what's up, my guy?
What's going on? I couldn't get my mic to work, but hopefully my laptop is good for audio.
Yeah, you sound good.
Cool.
Appreciate you coming on. I wanted to have you because I know you were tweeting during the game about Matt Patricia's defense, and we'll get into that. I think you'll be able to give some good insight. But first, I wanted to ask you, you were on the 2014 team.
Mm-hmm.
You went into 2015 being a defending national champion. So obviously different situations with how many guys you guys had back. But what do you think that locker room, having gone through it before, was like on Saturday as they got ready to face that team, kind of coming out for the first time after winning that national title as someone who's experienced it before?
So I think that they are a little bit different than us because a lot of the guys that contributed to that national championship has gone to the NFL, you know. So I think for them, they were way more hungrier than we were, you know, because for us, it was kind of like, it's the same crew. Like we gonna go out there on Saturdays and dominate because we just can't be stopped right now, right? So we were very cocky and confident going into a lot of games, to where these guys, you know, obviously you got your Jeremiah Smiths, you got your Caleb's Downs, you know, your IGBs and guys like that. But the core group, the majority of this team didn't do a thing last year. You know, they might have got some rotational pieces. So for them, they probably looked at it as, we need to prove ourselves. We need to prove, because everybody think we don't really got a chance to back-to-back. You know, everybody's like, oh, that team is gone. You know, this is going to take a couple of years. And I think those guys were eager to get out there to show Buckeye Nation and the rest of the world, like, hey, like, we didn't lose nobody. We just reloaded the clip. You know what I'm saying? So they definitely were extremely motivated. Those guys went out there and they played an awesome game. I know offensively, people weren't enamored with the 14 points. And I think that for them, they were trying to establish their identity. You know, they wanted to keep the ball out of harm's way for Julian, saying, you know, let him have a really good game. But they really wanted to establish the run game. And actually, I salute them for that, because to me personally, before Quinshon got here last year, I think that we tried to run the ball, but we abandoned it way too quick. You know, we had the CJ Stroud's, the Justin Fields, and we had these great group of wide receivers. So it was like it turned into a 7-on-7 for us. You know, we were just a big passing team, and fairly so. You know, like I said, when you got those great wide receivers, you got that great quarterback, I understand. But I thought getting the run game last year is what helped the Buckeyes win it all, because they had the ability to beat you both ways, whether that run or pass. Whether Quinshon or Travion take over the game, or you know, Will Howard and those receivers do what they do. So I think for them, they were trying to establish that identity, and a lot of that game was spent trying to see if this offensive line could create gaps and see if these running backs can get through the seams.
I think a lot of people have, at least in our sphere around Ohio State, have, as you mentioned, been underwhelmed by the offense. But Texas has a defense too. Like, this was the number one team in the country, right?
Yeah.
What was your view? And I know you probably haven't looked at them as closely as you have Ohio State's, but just what was Texas doing that maybe frustrated the Buckeyes that can be cleaned up from an offensive standpoint?
I just think that they did a really good job of being gap sound and gap discipline. You know, those guys weren't being moved out of their gaps. If they had a gap, they did a really good job of stalemating with our offensive line. So, we just got to get a better push on that offensive line and be able to get up to that second level. They have these great linebackers in Anthony Hills, Colin Simmons. Those guys are probably going to be first round picks one day. So we just got to do a better job of getting to that second level and creating a seam just for these running backs to get through, because I think James People is very explosive. I know that C.J. Donaldson is a power back, but he got a little juice to him as well. So we just got to do a better job of getting these double teams on those guys and working up to that second level to create a seam for these running backs.
Yeah, and you saw it at times, and I know there's a video going around about Luke Montgomery on social media today that highlights that on the touchdown. So it's there, and I think, fall camp when we were out there, we saw some of that as well. It just, it's a really good Texas team, I think, which
yeah.
Okay, let's get into the Buckeye defense, because I think my biggest question coming in was like, how long, I guess, would it take for Matt Patricia to really get these guys up to speed based on that performance? And we'll see what the Texas offense is this year. It looks like he's got it pretty quick. I guess first, why do you think it was able to click so quickly under Matt Patricia with so many new faces stepping into bigger roles?
So I think for him, he did a really good job of coming in and earning those guys' trust. If you listen to any of those defensive players talk about Matt Patricia, they rant and rave how great of a guy he is, how smart he is, how he simplified the game so they're able to play really fast. I think that's always key. I dealt with the coordinator change, when we got Chris Ash. We lost Everett Withers and got Chris Ash. And one of the things that made me trust Chris Ash was going through spring ball with him. Just him pointing things out. And, at those times he was behind me at the safety, like, hey, you need to pay attention to this running back, because if you see this, then think this. So it helped me speed my process and my thought process up, and I was able to anticipate things. I think Matt Patricia has done a wonderful job doing that, with the players on the defense. And then on top of that, it's always your cheat code when you got a Caleb Downs out there, somebody that's just as smart as the coaches, that's directing traffic and telling everybody what's about to happen and where to line up. So I just think for Matt Patricia, he did a really good job of earning these players' trust, and they trust that he will put them in the right position. And to their credit, every time he put them in position to make plays, they made them. That's why. So that relationship is going to continue to build as the season goes on. I
know Ryan Day talked this week about the continuity on the rest of the staff. Mm-hmm. And I think that probably plays a part too. They know everyone else that they have there coaching. I also heard it point out, and I forget who mentioned this. I was listening to something this week, but Matt Patricia's from the NFL, right? Where sometimes you bring a guy in, you have to teach him that week how to play your defense, pick a guy up off waivers or whatnot. Do you think that plays a part too? Just his experience of getting guys up to speed quick, whereas Jim Knowles has been a college guy, and I'm not taking anything away from Jim Knowles. It's different levels of teaching, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that worried me a little bit about Matt Patricia was, him coming from the NFL, because see, in the NFL, everybody's skill set is about the same. You got some guys that's elite, but for the most part, everybody's really, really good. And you spend your time as a defensive coordinator worried about what is it that the quarterback likes to do? How are we going to throw this? How are we going to take this away? And you have to be able to do it, be a game plan. To where in college, sometimes you just have better talent than the other team, and that kind of takes over. So a lot of the times NFL coaches come down in the college game, and they're so used to trying to make sure the player has all the information. Like, I'm trying to call the perfect play to put them in the perfect position to make the perfect play. And you don't have to do that in college if you got, especially at a place like Ohio State. You've recruited very well. If you just, sometimes the talent just overtakes everything and you just can't coach those things. So I was happy to see him simplified and these guys be able to play really, really fast. And like I say, he did some things pre-snap that made actually Texas's offense play slower than they wanted to, because there was a lot of thinking. And I think that was what made him stand out, is that he caused so much chaos post snap. Like, it was so much thinking. And as you know, if you play football, if you're a football player and you have to think, you're not playing as fast as you want to. So he did a really good job of making Texas offensive line and Arch Manning think.
Let's get into that. What did you see pre-snap? We'll start there, and then we'll get into some of the other stuff from kind of your eye that they were doing that was confusing Arch, especially early.
Yeah, so it was a couple of things he did. One, the first thing I seen was the thing I tweeted about. He had all the corners backed off, and he had all the safeties like on the same line, which is like unheard of. Like if it's like 3rd and 15, like everybody play the sticks, but this is on like 1st and 10, on 1st and 10 that they doing something like this. So what the problem with that is? So quarterback, you have to understand that quarterbacks are taught how they read coverages. They look at the boundary safety. So in our case, that would be Caleb Downs. He's our boundary safety. He's the guy that kind of plays in the box, So for a quarterback, they come out, where's number 2 at? So when you snap the ball, you say, all right, I'm looking at number 2. What is he going to do? Or pre-snap, I'm like, where's number 2 at? If he's already rolled down, I'm thinking cover 1 or cover 3. But if he stays high, then that means that it's cover 2 or quarters, right? So when you put them all across like that and they snap the ball and nobody moves, you sit there with the ball like, wait a minute, what are they in? What are they in? So it just caused so much confusion. And like I say, this is a game of seconds. It's a game of inches. So anytime that Arch has to sit there and think about what the heck are they in, buys that pass rush more time to get there. So I thought that was masterclass that they was doing that. Another thing that they were doing was, we talk so much about how Ohio State has all these versatile players. We got Caleb Downs, who he not only plays safety, he plays linebacker. He can play nickel. He can blitz. Like, he can do everything. And then you got a guy like Arvell Reese, who is a guy that he came in, he played a little DN. Then they played him at linebacker. Then they put him back at the end. So Matt Patricia understood that these two guys have special talent, right? And what he did was, I told you that Caleb Downs traditionally is our boundary safety. Well, what Matt Patricia was doing was putting him at linebacker at some plays. Like, you thought that he was playing safety, but he's actually the linebacker on this play. So when Arch is trying to read him to get the call, to get the disguise or the coverage that they're in, he's looking at the wrong person because Caleb ain't going nowhere because he's in the hook. So I thought that was just masterclass. Caleb is such a smart player because he knew that Arch Manning would look at him, and the way that pre-snap, he would purposely line up and point things out so Arch can see that he knows what's about to happen. So in Arch's mind, he thinks, well, I can't do that. But Caleb Downs is playing a totally different coverage that responsibility has nothing to do with him. So Arch absolutely could have threw it, but he took it away pre-snap and made him think he couldn't. So I just thought the mind games that they played. And then when you talk about Arvell Reese, like I said, traditionally he plays the wheel linebacker. That's his position. But when you put him on the line of scrimmage, he has a great pass rush. So what they were doing was putting him on the line of scrimmage, and sometimes he would rush, and sometimes he would pop out and be a hook player. And I thought that was just master class, because now you're creating what they call a simulated pressure. What a simulated pressure is when you show 6, but you only send 4, or you show 7, but you only send 3. The reason you want to do that is because once you line up on that line of scrimmage with those 6 or 7 guys, that offensive line has to set the protection. Like, this is what we have to do to stop this, right? So when the quarterback says go, the offensive line is kind of committed to that protection. If you only send in 4 people and the 2 guys pop out, now the offensive line is thinking to themselves, oh, wait, my guy isn't coming. Now what do I have to do? And if they don't react fast enough, typically people get through pretty freely. So, like I say, it was just ridiculous, man. I was sitting there like he got them. Their minds was totally messed up with some of the things that Matt Patricia was doing. So it was just a masterclass performance by that defense. I hope that I explained that in a way that kind of everybody can understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And the stuff with Caleb, I think, is so interesting because Brandon Innes told us during camp, like, he would sit there, and obviously he plays against Ohio State's offense all the time, right? But he's calling out the plays. He's getting in their heads. And, Brandon was talking about just how frustrating it was to go against him, but then how great it is to know that he's on your side when the games matter, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that,
when you play at Ohio State, that's one thing that you notice. That was me when we had Braxton Miller. I would sit there and see some stuff he do in practice and be like, woo, I'm glad I ain't got to defend that.
So let's talk about post-snap and some of the stuff you saw that they were doing once the ball is in Arch Manning's hands. I know a lot of it was what you just talked about, but what else did you see that maybe was different from last year with Jim Knowles, or stuff that you liked that they may be able to build on?
Honestly, I thought that our tackling was much better. It was a point at a time last year, especially earlier in the season, that I kind of thought he got away. But I thought guys understood their assignment and they shot gaps. The one play that comes to mind is, you remember I think it was the first fourth down that they went for it, and Arvell Reese shot his gap and got the tackle. Like, to me, like, these guys see things and then they go. Like, there's no hesitation. They're going and taking their shot. And I think that is, that Jim Knowles tried to get them to do that. And I would say his first year, maybe they did do that. But I think the last 2 seasons, it was kind of taken back a little bit. These guys kind of play more passively, because in that first season with Jim Knowles, it was a lot of explosive plays given up. Then the years after that, it became more conservative, where we're going to stay on top and eliminate explosive plays. And those guys weren't able to play as fast as they really wanted to. So I just thought that it was just clear. Like, their minds were so clear of what they had to do, and there wasn't a ton of thinking. So guys shot their gaps, and guys did a really good job of making tackles.
What do you think fans should expect to see going forward? More of the same? Do you think there's more to build on off this?
Yeah,
other than just improving?
No, yeah, I think that, some of the things that I looked at, I thought that they needed to clean up. Now, don't give me. Let me tell y'all that I am one of those guys that is very nitpicky. Like, this defense is good, but they can be really great. And I'm trying, when I say these things, is to for them to get to greatness, right? So some of the things that I saw was, we have to do a little bit of a better job of, when guards and tight ends rock back or guards pull, that linebacker that's leveraging that ball has to do a really good job of leveraging it. I thought it was a couple of times and a couple of plays where the ball kind of got outside of them, and I was able to give them like 2 or 3 extra yards to be able to pick up. So they got to do a better job of sending the ball back to the other 10 guys in the field. Don't let the ball get outside. And then at the corner position, same thing. When the receivers block down, so if they bring that wide receiver in tight to the line of scrimmage and he blocks down on that linebacker or that safety or that DN, the corners have to do a better job of getting up the field and squeezing the air out of it, because what was happening was, when they made contact. So when you do that, the receiver blocks down, typically a fullback or somebody comes out the backfield and tries to kick that corner out. Well, what was happening was, we weren't getting up the field fast enough, and it was creating a small seam for those running backs to get an extra 2 or 3 yards. Like I say, you didn't notice it because it wasn't that big of a deal, but I'm just telling you, I'm trying to get them to be perfect. And then the last thing I would say, when it came to the coverage, this is very petty of me saying this, but it was it was a 4th and goal. They threw the corner route. I can't remember. IGB made the play in the end zone, right? So the only thing that I would tell IGB on that is, so when you're in the open field, as a corner, you want to stay on top of everything. You want to stay on top of the routes. When you're in the red zone, it actually flips. You actually want that receiver to beat you in the end zone, and you want to be between the quarterback and the receiver. On that particular play, he was behind the guy. Now, he did a great job of coming underneath and making the play, but he can make that play that rep more easier by just letting the guy get past him and then mirroring him and playing it that way. Who knows? If he turns around enough, he might get a pick. So, like I say, that's just me being very nitpicky on things, but that's something that will take them from being a good defense to a great defense.
I know one of the talking points out there has been the pressure or not getting home. Looking at the numbers, they did pressure Arch a decent amount. What did you make of how they approached that? And is this something that you think will build throughout the season?
Yeah, no, it was the first game. It was guys just playing with reckless abandon. They'll figure out their pass rushing schemes and all of those things. And it gave Arch credit. Arch is more mobile than a lot of people think. He had the long run, so people knew that he could run. But I think once you get out there, you see like, oh, he's very agile. He does a really good job of being in that pocket and maneuvering in the pocket. So I just give Arch a ton of credit on that. I think that a lot of the times most quarterbacks isn't that agile as Arch is. So I think that they'll get home more, but they just got to do a better job of not getting too far up the field. If you're going to rush a guy that can move that well, you have to really stop your feet, get to the quarterback's shoulder, his downfield shoulder, and then, counter your move. But you never really want to get past that quarterback because you're creating those escape lanes. So they just got to be a little bit smarter. But like I say, game one, you're out there playing with adrenaline is rushing. You're trying to make a play. So I expected those guys to do that and create those lanes, but I think they'll clean that up moving forward.
And to that point, now you've got game film, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing this week is cleaning up some of that stuff, right? Now that you can see it in games.
Yeah. So that obviously, everybody's patting them on the back, but I think that Ohio State's coaching staff, they do a really good job of keeping you humble. Anytime that I thought that, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, they say, no, come on in here. Let me show you what you really have. Show you the things that you really could fix to be better. So I would imagine that is going on. And, with them playing Grambling State, I know people are like, well, how do they find motivation to play Grambling State and things like that? Well, the coaches is going to be like, you think you all that, but I'm telling you, you need to fix this. And Grambling State sees the tape as well. They're going to run some of the same things that they saw Texas have a little bit of success with to see if Ohio State fixed it. So I think this defense will be very motivated to show that they've learned from their mistakes and that they clean things up.
All right, last thing I got for you. First weekend of the NFL this weekend. Browns-Bengals, battle for Ohio. Who you got in this one? Who you got?
I'm gonna go with the Browns because I think that I understand that the Bengals have really put a lot of emphasis on starting fast this season because they start 0-2. Their schedule is about as similar as the Browns schedule, where it don't get easy after game one. So I think both teams are really chasing that win this week. But I just think the Browns being at home, the Browns being the underdogs, the Browns hearing about how they're going to be trash this year. They're only going to win 3 games. I think that they want to put people on notice. So I think that they'll play with their hair on fire. For some odd reason, Myles Garrett had some of his best games against Joe Burrow. Yep. To me, it really comes down to if Denzel Ward decides to shadow Jamar Chase. If he does that, I think that increases the chances of the Browns winning that game. But I don't think he's going to do it. I think because I think they trust Gnu a little bit too on that side, and it's a big contract year for Gnu as well. So I think they're going to let him get a couple of reps against Jamar Chase. But I got the Browns winning this game 24-21. Last second field goal. Andre Schmidt, the new kicker, kicks a game winner.
All right, that'll make at least half of Ohio pretty happy. The other half not so much.
Hey, I got Cincinnati going to the playoffs, so
there you go. Oh, well, there you go. That'll make the Bengals happy, even if it's not the fastest of starts. You can turn it around next week. Tyvis, thanks for jumping on, man. I appreciate it. That was great. Some of the breakdown, I really like when you talk like that. So I think you gave some good info out there, and I'll see you around soon.
I appreciate you, man. Go Bucks.
All right. Thanks, Tyvis. All right. Thanks again to Tyvis Powell for jumping on. He is doing Buckeye stuff with 97.1 The Fan. He's doing stuff up in Cleveland with the Browns, which is why I threw that question in there for him. Plus I think Tyvis adds some fun to his analysis, which I think is the point when we started this Bucknuts Happy Hour of like, yeah, we're going to talk ball, but we want it to be enjoyable. Like you're sitting around with your buddies having happy hour somewhere. I forgot to mention off the top, if you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button, turn on alerts so you get all of our videos or notifications, when we put videos out. If you haven't been paying attention, we've had plenty of them starting with fall camp, and you also get all these podcasts when they go live as well. So a great thing to do. If you listen to this on your podcast platform of choice, please leave a 5-star review, give us comments as you listen, all that stuff. It is all helpful in the podcasting world. I think Tyvis covered a lot of stuff. I wanted to go into maybe some things I think that the Buckeyes can focus on cleaning up this weekend. And I thought it was good what he said about, the coaching staff and keeping this group humble, because I think that's going to be important. I think last year, and Dave Biddle and I talked about this on the Instant Reaction show on Tuesday, like Ohio State came into the season knowing it was natty or bust. They knew they were good, all this. And I don't think they were overconfident by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they knew like, hey, we've got a team that can really make a run here and do some things. And then there were some little things as you got to that Oregon game. And if you remember, the season starts with 3 easily winnable non-conference games. You go to Michigan State, not a great Michigan State team, but a better test. You get Iowa coming into the horseshoe, a better test. You sort of slowly ramped up. But how much did they learn from those games, especially the non-conference games? Not a ton. And I think it took that Oregon loss for them to really like look in the mirror over that off week and make the adjustments necessary to get that defense where it needed to be with that personnel and everything. And I don't need to rehash all that for you. You guys all know that. But, and then again, sort of with the Michigan game. Now, that one I don't talk about as much in this vein, just because I still think that game was an anomaly. Like, I think that was Ryan Day and this coaching staff wanting to prove something that I don't think they needed to prove. I think if you just win that game by throwing the ball to your receivers that outmatched Michigan's corners, you don't need to run the ball up the middle to win it. Just win the game. You don't need to prove toughness. We've talked about this. Again, I don't want to go down that path too much, but I do think that Oregon loss was what like turned things in the right direction for the defense. And maybe the Michigan loss to some degree, obviously, with what the offense did in the college football playoff run. But this team doesn't have that, right? Your biggest game of the year, at least your biggest game so far, you win. And it's week 1. So you've got, as coaches, to do what Tyvis said. You got to kind of humble these guys and make sure that they are now learning, not just from this game and a win, which is, I think Ryan Day talked about it, like you'd rather do that. But sometimes a loss grabs players' attention more than a win. And, the little things that I got away with in these wins, I didn't get away with, and we lost, as opposed to not getting away with it and finding a way to win. So I think the dynamic this week is really interesting. And really this week, next week, before Ohio State has the off week and then goes out to Washington, which I think is an interesting game, there has to be that consistent improvement on little things that weren't going right each week. And that will be telling if we see that, while taking into account that the opposition is not nearly as good as it was week 1 or what it will be once they get into Big Ten play. So what are those things? Where do you go? Well, the first, and Tyvis touched on this, is the run game and getting that going. And I've seen, at least on the Bucknuts message board on the front row, like a lot of quick to doubt this run game and CJ Donaldson, especially James Peoples. And the numbers aren't great. I understand why it's like, well, is this run game going to be what it was last year? 67 yards for CJ Donaldson and the 1-yard touchdown. James Peoples with 20 yards on 10 carries. It wasn't what you hoped, but I'm not out on this run game. I think you went up against a really good, as Tyvis talked about, defensive line that was really gap sound, and maybe as good of a group as you will face all season. Cheers. But I think that there were some positives. The play that they scored the touchdown on, like, I want to see that in the red zone for sure. And like, would you have rather them get it in earlier? Yes, that's fine. But I like that they have that package with Nate Roberts as a fullback, which we'd kind of heard a little bit about going into the season. So I like that. What you need, though, is more of that push. And I talked with some people this week, that know offensive line and run play better than I do, having done it at a high level. And I think the biggest thing for me is like the pulling guys. Like, I think that needs to be better. Like, often they were running into the backsides of the offensive linemen on the side that they were pulling towards. And now some of that is you got to get the push up front, but it's also recognizing sort of where you're going. But the biggest thing, and I think Tyvis touched on, is those double teams, the push. Like, you've got to do that. And then I think, too, CJ Donaldson said, well, I wasn't reading the game that well when we spoke to him on Wednesday night. And that's important, too. Like, if there's a little bit of a hole, and Carlos Loughlin talks about this, you've got to hit it. You've got to get through it. Like, those holes close quick, especially in a game like this. And remember, CJ Donaldson, he's played Texas before. He's played some of these games, but he wasn't playing at Ohio State, where like every play is being scrutinized and looked at. So I think he needs to see it better. Obviously, James Peoples, I think, can and will be better. I'm not worried about him. The things I've heard and some of the little bits we've seen, this was a big first game to be in a much bigger role. Now if we're sitting here next week coming out of Grambling and the numbers aren't really good, because I think you should be able to get push and do all this against Grambling, like, it'll take a lot of analysis to see, okay, did it get better? Did it get better? But for me, that's got to be a thing that we see progress in this week. The offensive line getting that push, the running backs going where they need to be and hitting the holes on time, all of that. And I think it will be. I have trust in this run game, but I need to see it. The second thing, and I think this is one of the things most Buckeye fans really want to see, is the explosion that this offense has. And I think it's there because I trust Julian Sayin, and we know what these receivers can do. I thought the offensive line and the pass blocking and all that was really good. So it's, for me, giving more opportunities, right? They only had one shot downfield. The Julian Sayin, the first fourth down when he throws to Max Clare, I know everyone talks about the opportunity to hit Jeremiah Smith, who was open. I think some of that is Julian Sayin, and I wrote about this week. He sees the safety kind of coming over the top. He doesn't want to take a risk in a game where they were being very risk averse. But also, I think with experience, he's going to recognize I come out of that play action a little bit quicker. I see Jeremiah, boom, that ball's got to get there to beat the safety coming over. Like, you have to recognize that you can make that throw even if the safety is coming over, because you see it, you go, and you hit that play faster. But I also want to see more opportunities like we saw with Carnell Tate and the one-on-one, and letting Julian just kind of cook a little bit, build his confidence, let the offensive line pass block. And look, I think it will definitely happen over these next 2 weeks, given the opponent. But you need that to build the confidence, and then you've got it, you've done it. Now you do it against Washington. Okay, now you can build and build and build. And all of a sudden, this offense looks a lot more explosive than it did in week one. We were talking with Tyvis about the pass rush. Like, I liked some of the pressures they got on Arch Manning. You want him to get home, no doubt about that. This is what we were talking about this time a year ago, right? The pressure was there. You look at the pressure rates and the pressure you put on the quarterback. The sacks weren't there. No sacks. Well, I guess Arvell Reese has sack, but no sack by the defensive line. That's something I think you need to start seeing again in a overmatched opponent situation in the next 2 weeks. Sort of an obvious thing, but you got to build that confidence. And I think, look, winning against Texas week one is going to build overall confidence, right? And hey, we not only hung, but we beat what everyone thought was the best team in the country. Now it's our turn to, go out there and Ohio State's number one. But then going from that to executing it every week. And I think one thing that is important in these next two games is nameless, faceless opponent. It doesn't matter that you're playing Grambling or that you're playing OU, Ohio University, or whoever. You've got to go out and play at the same level as you did against Texas. It's got to be with the same intensity on every play, until you're up, whatever it is, and you get pulled out of the game. Like that has to be the focus. And if we don't see that, then I think there's a little bit more room for concern. I don't think that will be an issue with this team, because I do think with these guys, they recognize, as Tyvis was talking about, comparing his 2015 team to this team, like, so many of these guys still have a lot to prove. And, while we saw starters in the game against Texas, there are still positions, Ryan Day's talking about, we want to play a lot of guys. We want to see guys on film. And I think that's another thing that's going to be important over these next 2 weeks is see what else you got. Like, Ohio State's one big long drive, that touchdown drive in the first half, Ethan Onyanwa was in at right guard. Now, I'm not saying that he deserves to be starting over Tegra Shabola, but that's something you need to iron out over these next couple weeks, I think, is, who is the best five for sure. They leaned on experience in this game other than Phillip Daniels. So I think that you've got to make those decisions. Other positions, like at safety, I thought Jalen McClain played really well, but we've heard a lot about what Malik Hartford offers. How does it look with him next to Caleb Downs or Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford on the field together, right? it's positions like that may still be up for grabs, like a little bit more Peyton Pierce. Not that you don't have confidence in Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, because I think you certainly do, but just like, what do you have there? When we saw, I think Peyton Pierce played like 15 snaps or so. And, positions like that, I'd like to see some Lincoln Kienholz, not because I don't have confidence in Julian Sayin and his ability to get the job done, but more so that I think, just in case you need him, let's see what he can give in a game, because he really, other than that Missouri game in the Cotton Bowl where he was not prepared, we have not really seen much of Julian Sayin in a game like atmosphere. I think that is going to be important. The running backs, again, we talked about that. I'd like to see more out of the tight ends just in general in the pass game. You heard so much about Max Clare, and then the first play he gets is a drop. Now, he did come back with a catch later, one catch for 11 yards. I think you are expecting him to be a little bit more involved in the pass game. Now, you only completed 13 passes, and 6 of them went to Jeremiah Smith. So, that's not a lot of volume, and I do think that will increase. But again, just things over these next couple weeks that you can do to build confidence in your starters, see what you've got in backups or guys that maybe are pushing for roles, and then, building this confidence of the whole team and like, hey, if we need you to go in, you're ready to go, right? And that's going to be vital, no doubt about that going forward. You saw it last year in the run of the national championship. Teams don't stay fully healthy. Guys miss some game, all of that. You've got to be ready for what's coming. So I'm going to wrap up. This is a shorter version of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. It's Grambling week, and I thought we did a good job of covering Texas and sort of recapping some of the defensive stuff. The headline you will be reading later Saturday night. This is a 3:30 game on BTN, or Sunday morning. This one's pretty simple, right? Buckeyes dominant, follow-up Texas performance with big win. I think this game is going to be, sort of a name-your-score game for Ohio State, assuming they come out and treat it the right way, and I think they will. You go out, you handle business. By halftime, I think people will be clamoring for starters to get out of the game. Whether Ryan Day will do that or not, we'll see, because I do think he wants to get some of these guys reps, but I do think it's a good opportunity. You look around the country at some of the teams that got talked about last week. Michigan, for instance, playing New Mexico. Not that New Mexico and Grambling are the same, but this is your opportunity to just put up some numbers. And no offense to Grambling, but you've got that chance to look really dominant and have people talking about you, in an even better light than they were this week coming off of the Texas win. And I think that will happen. I don't think this game will be any sort of issue for the Buckeyes. So thank you again for Tyvis Powell for jumping on. I thought he gave some really good analysis on this Buckeye defense and why things have worked so quickly under Matt Patricia. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the thumbs up button, hit the bell for notifications so you know when we post any videos, podcasts, interviews, anything. And if you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice, 5-star review, comments, all that is great for us. And we'll talk to you next week, Buckeye fans. Cheers.